What would be the crime of the person who aided another person in committing the crime of, say, for example, homicide? And he participated by, say, for example, the person holds or held the hand of or hands of the victim. What will be his criminal liability under the circumstances? Another question will be, what will be the criminal liability of the person in the crimes of rape? That person or his participation is merely to hold the hands of the victim while the other performing the sexual assault on the said victim. What will be the criminal liability of the person holding the hand while the other is performing the sexual assault? The same as to the previous example I have given, or the previous question I have asked. What will be the criminal liability of the person who holds or who held the hand of the victim while the other performing or stabbing the victim? Now, that would be our topic for today, and that is persons criminally liable under the law, or specifically under Title 2, Article 16 until Article 19 of the Revised Penal Code. Now, before we go to aggravating circumstances and alternative circumstances, I think about discussing first person criminally liable to change topics on the lectures. So, who are persons criminally liable under the law? Well, the Article 16 of the Revised Penal Code speaks about who are criminally liable. And for grave and least grave felony, we will deal with it, the grave or least grave felonies later. For grave or least grave felony, the persons criminally liable will be principal, accomplices, and accessories. Now, for light felonies, the only persons criminally liable will be the principal and accomplices. If the crime committed is light, considered as a light felony, only the principal and only the accomplices will be held criminally liable, while accessories is not included. Now, in the example given, what would be the criminal liability of the person stabbing? Of course, it's natural and common sense that the person stabbing, in the first example given, will be considered as principal of the crime. How about now the person who held the hands of the victim? What will be his criminal liability? Will he be considered as a principal or accomplice? Now, under the law, there are three principles, or there are three considered principles under the law or under Article 17 of the Revised Penal Code, and that would be a person who take a direct part in the execution of the act. The act itself, he did the part, or he committed the elements of the crime, or most of it. He took part in the execution of the act. And in the example given, the sexual assault or in the physical assault of the person, that person will be considered as principal by direct participation. How about the person holding the hand of the victim? The person holding the hand of the victim will be considered as accomplice or accessory. Now, under the law, the person, or under considering the example given, the person holding the hand of the victim will be considered, or may be considered, as a person of principal by indispensable cooperation, or what you call this, under paragraph 3 of the article 17. Now, first we will talk about article 17, the persons considered as principals. First one is principal by direct participation, who take a direct part in the execution of the act. Principal by direct participation or execution. The second person considered as principal is principal by inducement, or directly force or induce others to commit the crime. So that's principal by inducement or by compulsion. And then last, those who cooperate in the commission of the offense by another act, without which would have been the act would not have been accomplished. So we have a principal by direct participation. First, principal considered under the law. Second is principal by inducement. And third is principal by indispensable cooperation. He took part of another act, or he commit, or he did another act which would indispensable in completing or committing the crime, and that is principal by indispensable cooperation. So we'll talk about first principal by direct participation, or by taking part in the execution by directly by overt acts. Now, that principle is easy to recognize. If you see someone who is committing a crime by stealing, stabbing, or raping, the person who directly execute the act, of course, he will be considered as principal by direct participation. And that is easy to recognize. Principal by inducement, however, is not as easy to recognize as uh, principal by direct participation, because his participation is by inducing others to commit the crime. Say for example, he induce or force or give out money for other person to commit the crime in his behalf. So the other person pasa ng contract killing. Now, ang kanang nagsugo mo na siya principal by direct participation. Ang kanang nagbuhat gyud sa krimen mo na siya principal by ang nagsugo mo na siya principal by inducement, and ang kanang nagbuhat sa krimen mo na siya principal by direct participation. Now, you may ask, how about conspiracy? How are we going to relate conspiracy in this principle by inducement, participation, or indispensable cooperation? Now, if you remember, conspiracy, the akubuan is the akubol. There is a prior agreement between the parties to commit the crime. Now, conspiracy in general is not punishable by law. It is as if there is a plan, but without executing the plan, the participants in planning the commission of the crime is not yet liable. Now, there are only instances where the law punishes conspiracy and proposal, and we have already discussed that. Now, if they have prior agreement and they in fact committed a crime, they will be considered as first by direct participation if they all took part in the execution. Otherwise, if the other person only induces other or only induced other to commit the crime, say for example robbery, then uh, the person who took part directly by overt act will be considered as principal by direct participation, while the person who induced others to commit the crime will be considered as principal by inducement. So, ang pinaka the best nga example is sugoon na mo sugo sa isa ka tawo nga mupatay. So, the in consideration of reward or money. So, the person who who instruct others or who induce others to commit crime of murder or homicide, as the case may be, or it should be murder, then he will be considered as a principal by inducement, while the person who execute the order will be considered as principal by direct participation. Now, third is principal by indispensable cooperation. Now, uh, this principal is taking another act which would complete the commission of the crime. He may perform another act which would complete the crime. Say for example, in robbery, he was a lookout and in a getaway driver. So, without his participation, the crime of robbery would not have been accomplished. Without being a lookout, the robbery would not have been successful. So, his participation is indispensable, meaning important, necessary, and uh, necessary in completing the crime. So that is principle by indispensable cooperation, and that is the three principles we were talking about. Again, principle by direct participation, who took directly in committing the crime. That is easy to recognize. The one who punched, the one who stabbed, the one who committed the rape. These are principle by direct participation. Now, by endorsement, kanang gasugo, kanang gapwersa, kanang hatag og order, they are principal by inducement, and you have to establish the link between the principal by inducement to principal by direct participation. Kay kung naay magsugo and then walay mubuhat, there is no crime yet committed. Now, if the crime is committed, then ang ningbuhat mo na siya principal by direct participation, and then ang nagsugo mo na siya principal by inducement. We will distinguish principal to accomplices and conspiracy next topic. And I hope you learned something about principal by participation, direct participation, by inducement, and by indispensable cooperation. We will continue our lecture on aggravating circumstances next time. Be safe.